you mean that it's going to get much worse before it gets better?
Yes, I mean that, yeah. I know
Okay.
that people don't like it when I say that, but I mean, a lot of us, I think, especially if we're in this field of awakening, right? And if we're in the field of spirituality, what we tend to do is have like a real rosy colored sort of sunglasses deal on. Or the exact opposite. We're looking at what really is. But those of us who are like, oh, I have a lot of hope in humanity waking up, and I have a lot of hope and things going better, we're not really in reality about how attached people as a general species are attached to whatever patterns they've been repeating over and over again. What it takes for the average person to get to a point where they're ready to change a pattern is like they have to be in enough pain that it's worth it, because change is profoundly terrifying, right? Most of us know that in order to get to a place where you're ready to, say, get out of the marriage, or a place where you're ready to go change where you live or something like that, it's like the pressure cooker has to get real, real, real hard, right? So yes, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
But do we always need to suffer or have pain in order to grow? Or can't we grow through hope and love?
Let's define pain as separate to suffering, right? Because most of us have this relationship to pain, which is built on experiences when we've let things get very, very bad. We aren't actually meant to play the game this way. We're meant to use, let's call it contrast, in order to create expansion. So what that would look like if we were in a really healthy state is that we would come into this time-space reality where you see negatives and positives, right? And you would be like sifting and sorting through those things and allowing your awareness of what is unwanted. You would be allowing that to give rise to your idea of what is wanted, and then you would very quickly move towards it. So essentially, this gap between where you are and where you want to be doesn't get really, really big. This is not how most people play it. Now, I have to say that the way that I just described it, that process is not super painful. You're not going to get into a lot of suffering. In fact, it's going to feel like a rub. It doesn't feel necessarily good, but you're not going to be like, oh, I really, really don't want that, you know? What happens here is that we don't play the game this way. We come into what is unwanted, but we've got all kinds of patterns that continue the unwanted. And because of that, this gap between where we are and where we want to be becomes so large, and we hold ourselves so separate from it that it's like we're drowning, essentially, in the rapids of our own creative process. And this is when you start to see those really big manifestations of pain. Things like, now we've ended up in war, or now I'm in a loveless marriage, or, I could sit here and list all kinds of things out. It's an unnatural thing that humans have developed as conscious creators, or should I say unconscious creators. It's this unnecessary thing that people get into this relationship with, sorting through the unwanted and the wanted, where they build such a gap. So my answer would be, is pain necessary? Yeah, pain, negative, the unwanted, necessary. We came down into this time-space reality knowing exactly that we would use that element of this, that law of this time-space reality, specifically for our own self-awareness process, for our own expansion process. Does it have to become suffering? No. But I mean, think about it this way. If you came into this life and you experienced the unwanted, and you knew that that gave rise to, say, the desire for a loving relationship, but you didn't have all kinds of beliefs and ways of behaving that contradicted that loving relationship, you wouldn't go into such pain about it when you felt the lack of it. It would be like, oh, that's what I need. That's what I want. Okay, now I'm going in the direction of this with my thoughts, going in the direction of this with my actions, going in the direction of this with my behavioral changes. And you wouldn't get into that state of constant angst about it.
Okay, so when we hear this, we know it's going to get a bit worse. For the human mind, that is like, oh my goodness, I'm spiritual. I would love things to be rosy and shiny and more easy, right? So what can we hold on to when it comes to hope?
Well, what I would tell the average person is that awakening is what is going to move you through this whole thing. It's the conscious awareness of how to surf the waves. So when we are looking at things and you're hearing somebody like me say that for the collective of humanity, things are going to get worse before they get better, does that mean that you necessarily have to have the same experience in that bigger picture that everybody else is having? Not necessarily. A lot of that will depend on where you feel like you want to plug yourself in and what you want to be a part of. What I would have people understand, though, is that when we have resistance to this, it's because, it's the same as us resisting the fact that there are waves in the ocean. What we are doing when we're here dedicated to the mastery of consciousness, to the mastery of life, is we are becoming master surfers. So it's like the better you get at surfing, the better you get at riding those waves, no matter how intense they get. So any of us who are like, you know what, actually, wait, I'm stepping back, I'm becoming awake and aware, I'm facing myself, I'm becoming very conscious of what I want to create, I'm aware of how my patterns feed into what I create. That's you getting on top of that wave and surfing that wave out. So the more conscious you are, the more you're dedicated to awakening and things like that, the better this process is going to go for you. The only thing that's going to be worse for you is that when other people are able to be in denial and cope, you are going to be able to not do that, and you're gonna have to essentially sense what's going on within the context of reality. And obviously, when the totality of a species that you are a part of is suffering, you are going to feel that if you are awake and aware. So it's going to be really necessary for those of us who are dedicated to surfing these waves. It's going to be necessary for us to find ways to attune to, things like peace. So even if we're really in it for a certain period of time, it'll be necessary for us to build those rituals up and to go to those places that really fuel us, where we can turn our frequency to the things which cause us to feel total peace. And for a moment, it doesn't feel like we're surfing these massive waves, But that's going to mean that, like, a lot of people are going to have to change the way they eat because of this. They're going to have to change where they live. They're going to have to change, like, habits in their life. It's not going to work to be keeping yourself in an environment and in a behavior that creates so much pressure for yourself, while at the same time, having to sort of surf such massive collective waves.
That makes sense. You've had extrasensory abilities all your life, and I've interviewed a lot of people who are channeling. Now, would you say you are channeling, or are you more just deeply connected with your soul? Like you have sort of a direct line to your inner genius, or whatever you call it. And how do you sort of then see, for instance, the future, like you're explaining right now what you're seeing? Is it something you're seeing visually, or is it like a feeling? Could you explain how it works for you?
So the way to understand me is to understand that the majority of the people who are coming into this time-space reality called Earth, they're plugging into this construct completely. It would be very similar to coming into a computer game and you are the avatar and you've forgotten the person who's sitting on the couch. I was never able to come in that way. It was literally a disability from that perspective. I was never able to fully phase with this time-space reality, meaning I was never able to, using your words, cut the line or forget that direct contact to the aspect of me that's sitting on the couch. Now, of course, if we want to put this in more spiritual language, you could consider that the eternal self. So with that direct line, which I was never able to cut off from, it gives you like a lot of awareness about things that are outside this perceptual awareness, including information that's not limited by time and space. The way that comes through my sensory, faculties here in the physical is visual, it is auditory, sometimes it comes with taste, sense, and smells. I'm intensely clairvoyant, so a lot of them will come with pictures, but some of it comes with the just knowing. That's the more the spiritual, we call that spiritual intuition. It comes through the crown chakra, and it's not like you're interpreting pictures. It's more like this is a sense of complete knowing, as if it's a full download from these non-physical dimensions.
When you're able to see these things, and I assume that could be a good thing and a bad thing in a way, that there are positive things about it and there are challenging things about it. Do you sometimes see multiple futures?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I see there are multiple futures. There's multiple timelines for anything. What it looks like is really interesting because you're working with probabilities. So let's say that you've got an ocean of probabilities. Those will collapse down into more strong possibilities and probabilities, and those will collapse down again. And so what you end up with, let's say I'm looking at a person, or I could look at the timeline for Earth, is these 3 dominant life paths. So you can look at it like a tree, like you've got 3 and then 12, and then it just keeps branching off, right? So what I'm looking at when I'm looking at futures is these 3 dominant potentials. And if I see the same thing in all 3 potentials, the likelihood of that thing happening is like through the roof, right? Of course, I will say that the more conscious that an individual becomes, or that a collective becomes, the more variability you're going to see in those life path potentials. You're not going to see the same static type of stuff. Why? Because a person is consciously making the choice to change patterns. Most people on Earth are not doing that yet. So, if you see the same thing popping up in all 3 life paths, what it would take for them to alter those things is like something very extreme, and usually you'll see that thing. So you can reasonably, know what is going to happen within the collective based off of that.
To watch the full video, click the link below, and I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel.
Resto maliata falia, tan shavra leto.